we made an outline at one point, kind of like a dream mom. Like, what would I want to show up like as I don't know, my ideal mom. And once we made that kind of outline, I realized that I was already doing a lot of those things. My kids already had a safe place to come and talk to me. They already had a right to express their voice and feelings and emotions. The Byron Katie quote, an inauthentic yes is a no to self. I remember when you sent me that quote and I put it on my fridge because I was walking around just yes, 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 yes. And so reeling that back in also modeled for my kids that you can make a choice. No can be a complete sentence. So once we went through that, I could literally take a breath like that. It was like, oh, I'm already showing up in all these new ways and I'm not giving myself any credit for it.
Welcome to Grow with Robin Breckenridge, a podcast about stepping into the most fully expressed, aligned, and conscious version of yourself. Here, we dive into the real work of personal growth, establishing boundaries, understanding your patterns, building self-trust, healing emotional wounds, and creating relationships that feel safe, authentic, and fulfilling. I'm Robin, a life and relationship coach, and in each episode, we'll explore the tools, insights, and conversations that will help you not just improve your life and relationships, but truly transform them. You don't have to just go through it. Let's grow through it. And let's do it together. Hi, and welcome back to Grow with Robin Breckenridge. If you've been listening, you know we've been exploring boundaries, not just how to set them, but how to feel safe enough in your body to actually live them. And today's guest is someone whose story is so powerful. I say this now every time I have a guest, Katie, like I already feel like I'm going to cry. This is a theme. But today's guest is someone whose story is so powerful and such a reflection of this work, and someone who I know and love very deeply. And her name is Katie Parisi. And when Katie and I first met, Katie was working as an accountant, raising 4 kids and carrying a belief that her trauma made her different than everybody else. And when I started talking about boundaries and nervous system regulation and like parts work, and I think it's more specifically boundaries, I can just say that I don't think she was exactly sold at that time on what I was saying. And I know you've told me. And honestly, like I love that about her. She, from the get-go, from the minute I met her, was sharp, funny, skeptical, and fiercely self-protective then. But underneath all of that was a woman who was deeply ready to come home to herself. Okay, I'm crying for sure. Like, how am I supposed to do these shows with you guys?
No, I'm definitely going to cry.
Right? We can't even make it through the intro. Okay, over time, Katie did the work. And let me tell you, I have witnessed all of it. You showed up. She showed up. She's built nervous system capacity. She got to know her inner protector. She made aligned decisions, not just for survival, but for inner peace. And I'll never forget this moment. Katie just recently happened where Katie came to a retreat that I did in Tennessee. And we did some really, crazy, deep, profound, transformative work. And I've known Katie's story very intimately for a long time. And you had a moment before it was your turn to go where you were like, maybe this is too much, because you definitely have a story full of complex trauma. And you were so brave and you did it anyways. And you united the whole group. And in fact, our group text is named after your inner child, right?
Yeah. Rat Hog.
Rat Hog is your inner child's name, which is a very endearing name, not a bad name. But after that, we kind of gave you reflections of like parts of your work that resonated with us. And I said to you, Katie, maybe it's true that you do have the most trauma in most rooms, but I've watched you alchemize all of that. Again, emotional, but I've watched you alchemize all of that to wisdom. And so what we said after that beautiful piece of work you did, I said, what if now, instead of looking at it as I have the most trauma in the room, I have the most wisdom in the room? And so you are a perfect guest because you've done all of the hard things. You've shown up over and over again for yourself. And I have literally watched you transform into this like beautiful butterfly of sorts that's now doing all this amazing healing work out in the world. So I'm so excited for you to share any part of your story that you're willing to share today. And so now Katie helps others do the same that I helped you do. You help people heal, right? Yes. So after more than 20 years in accounting, she transitioned into healing work, offering breath work, body talk, which you might need to explain because not everybody might know that, sound healing, and somatic support to help others release what they've been carrying emotionally, physically, and energetically. So this conversation today is about boundaries. We'll kind of see where it takes us. But even more than that, it's about how to protect yourself without hurting yourself. It's about the journey from skepticism to self-trust. So let's get into it.
Okay.
You ready?
I'm ready.
I'm so happy you're here. This is a full circle moment for me because I bet you if we rewound to like 6 years ago, maybe?
A while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably like 6 years ago.
Yeah. I know like COVID's my marker. And I think I knew you shortly before that, right?
Yes. Right before that.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that like if we got in a DeLorean time machine and went back in time and I said, hey, one day you're going to be a guest on my podcast and you're going to be sharing how your transformative journey is going to help so many people, that might have been hard to believe then.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. So, it's crazy. It's a very much a full circle moment for me as well that I didn't even have in my vision. So,
right. I know that's that's why I'm having you guys on, because, that vantage point that we're in when we first start the work, we just don't know like what's on the other side. So let's go back to the beginning for me and you. I know when we met, just because you've shared it, you were somewhat skeptical sometimes of me or some of the things that I was talking about, specifically boundaries, which same true for me. But what do you remember about where you were like in your life at the time that we met and how you were protecting yourself then?
So when I first met you, I had never even heard the word boundary. I may have heard it once or twice, but I did not understand anything behind it or about it. Mm-hmm. And I was in just such a place of chaos. Everything was so loud and overwhelming. I showed up a lot by testing people. I had so many unhealthy patterns in place that I identified personally. I felt like those patterns were dictating like my self-worth. And I really felt like my trauma and my story and my not enoughness walked into the room before me. So hearing the word boundary sounded crazy, especially because I came to you the first call because I was craving connection, but I was pushing everybody away. And to think of that first call, I mean, I was sitting at a skate park with my kids crying and I wasn't even sure. I remember being like, actually, I don't think that you're going to be able to help me, but thanks for trying. And thankfully, we scheduled another call and we talked. And then once I realized slowly over time, I practiced many boundaries. I think that once I realized that was doable and it was actually making my life less chaotic, and it was really helping me identify the boundary pyramid, really helped me identify where everybody was in my life. I think the first time you showed me the boundary pyramid, I think I had like 20 people in shared interests. I even tried to put a lot of people in trust, and then I was like, no.
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, based off your story, you had a lot of trauma growing up, and so it can be really hard to trust people. And when I was kind of coming up with the bones of this episode, I was really struck by like how you always have had a protector on board. And in the beginning of our work, your protector reminded me of mine. It was our inner teenagers, and they were trying the best they could, but it was taking us out of our integrity, the way that it was protecting us. But I think back, like when I met you, I was working for a different company, a different organization, a life coaching organization. And at the time they were doing groups. And I was about 1 foot out the door at that time, kind of knowing that like I needed to gear up and go out on my own. And we had our first group call, and that protector came on board. And I could kind of tell you were a little like reserved in the call. And then we got off. And I think almost immediately you shot me an email and you were like, I don't belong in here. Mm-hmm. And there was that story of like, my trauma is so much different than everybody else's. It's almost not relatable to be in a group. But what I really admired was like that protector. Thankfully, you were willing to, I said, hey, like, let's do some individual work. Or you might have even asked me. I can't remember the exact specifics at the time. But that protector knew that like you kind of needed more one-on-one support than the group. And I think you said like an influencer connected you to that group, which is just evidence of how randomly we'll find each other, right?
Yes. I was thinking of that this morning on my drive-in. I'm like, buying a hoodie that an influencer posted has literally changed my life. I mean, I bought that hoodie as an accountant, and I'm sitting here today.
Do you still have
nowhere near that? Nowhere near accounting. I have an accountant for my stuff now. So yeah.
Do you still have the sweatshirt?
I do. Yes.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So, thankfully, like we can always look at like sometimes these parts of self that cause chaos or noise in our life as like a bad thing. But that inner teenager, she needed to be parented. There's no question about that. And same with mine. But she was fierce and she was trying to keep you as safe as she could. And I think even now, like you are fiercely protective of your family and yourself, mm-hmm. but with that part of parenting your inner child, or inner teenager, boundaries are just a part of. Like if we look at boundaries just from like an intellectual perspective of like, this is what I read in a book. But I mean, think about any relationship you have, or if you're a parent, you can't parent anybody without limits. Mm-hmm. And that teenager in you, she needed some limits, right?
Oh yeah, she needed some limits. She was loud. She was very loud. She was in the driver's seat.
Yeah, she needed a sweatshirt and some limits. Mm-hmm. So tell me, Katie, like what helped you start to learn how to protect yourself in ways that didn't hurt you and other people?
Well, working with you, definitely. I had never, I don't know, none of everything that I was learning had never crossed my mind. I overextended myself, said yes to everything. My self-worth was tied to being available no matter what. I mean, the list goes on and on of ways that I was self-abandoning myself. But at the same time, that teenager was coming up front and center, she was ready to rumble at any time. Yeah. And throughout, you were the first, I had worked with therapists, but working with a coach who said, you can text me between sessions if you need help or if, something comes up. I remember when you first said that being like, oh, she doesn't mean it. And so I struggled. And then we would get on the next call and I'd be like, oh, all this came up. And you'd be like, well, why didn't, you could have texted me. And finally I leaned into that. And then I feel like that was the first time in my life that I had a safe place that I could go to over and over. But at the same time, you modeled boundaries to me for the first time, like if you were out with your family, you have your own boundaries around your practice. So just seeing someone model that, but also be supportive of me without judgment and the things that I would text at the most heightened times, that was a period in my life where I numbed out in any way possible. So you got a lot of those texts as well. And they were always met with compassion and then would be mirrored back in a way like what part of your inner self is showing up and just a lot of different ways. And that's also when I learned about eating invisible popcorn, which anyone who has worked with you has eaten probably a lot of invisible popcorn. And that took an adjustment, because if I was in a situation where my inner teenager wanted to come up, in the past, she would have come up loud front and center and would have presented herself in a really unhealthy way. So I remember the first couple times I ate invisible popcorn, it gave me that pause to reflect on why am I going to react this way right now? And then once I, would come back to the calls and be like, oh, this is what happened. Then we would talk about like, was there a boundary that had been violated? Like, had I even communicated a boundary there? So once I wrapped my head around boundaries at first, I was like Oprah. I mean, I was handing them out left and right. I was like making it rain, boundaries everywhere. And then I went through a phase where I was pretty harsh with my boundaries. I had to learn how to communicate those. So yeah, it's definitely been a process. And in doing that, it has helped my inner teenager. She didn't need to get louder. She needed to feel safe, and she needed to be able to show up without shame and without judgment. And that changed. You were there for it. That changed everything. So.
Well, I mean, the invisible popcorn, for anybody who isn't familiar, you might want to rewind back to some of the past episodes, but it's really a way that we can pause when we're around people that are activating, but we know they don't have the capacity to like have a conversation or give an invitational boundary. So we observe rather than react and respond. And, I don't know. Maybe I was going to say, like, I'm sure everybody can relate to having like a reactive teenager in them, but I've worked with a lot of people and some people don't. You and I have very reactive teenagers, right? But it brings up such a good point, Katie, that like and I haven't talked about parts of self like as like an episode yet. It's coming up very soon. So this is like jumping ahead a little bit, but like, when that inner adolescent is up or that inner teenager, that's our protector. That's the best protector we have on board for our inner child. And basically its job is to go, whatever that little kid went through, my job is to never have them go through that again, never have them feel sad, never have them not feel good enough, whatever. So when the inner teenager is up, it means the inner child has been activated. So like, this is a hugely broad question and do whatever you want with it. But like, I feel like it wouldn't be fair to do this episode without some form of like background of your childhood. And I know that it's very layered and there's a lot of trauma in it, but like, how would you explain? Because right before we hopped on, when I was having all my tech issues, those are still happening. You said the core of my work is like my trauma story, because I'm admittedly a wounded healer. And I think wounded healers get a bad rap because personally, I'd rather go to someone that has lived experience than read it in a book personally. But you got to be a wounded healer with ethics and boundaries, but like we both are wounded. We've gone through some things. So like, what can you tell the people listening about what your inner child went through and why your inner teenager and protector were so strong?
I think, obviously we've touched base a little bit. I definitely had a very traumatic childhood. My mother, rest in peace, suffered greatly from mental illness and addiction. She tried her best with what she had. I realize that now, working through that. But growing up, especially with her, there was no emotional safety on board. There was a lot of hypervigilance. I had to scan a lot for safety. I had to adjust, not just with her, but I had to adjust and constantly scan and figure out like, okay, what Katie needs to show up to stay safe in this situation. Yeah. And that was hard. And I did not realize how those patterns that I had in childhood, the ways that I hid or lashed out or you name it, would later show up in life. But I can't get on the floor and throw a tantrum. So now I get blackout and throw a tantrum. Then I did, now I don't. Yeah. But that was that was what I did then. And in learning that so much of that stemmed from my inner child just wanting to feel safe was really a changing point for me to then get on those calls and realize that I had again put my inner child in an unsafe situation when one of my main driving goals when I got on my first call with you and had been up until I met you was to parent nothing like my mother, you know, and I hate to talk bad about her like that. And I don't mean to sound harsh, but I think that where she's at now, you know, she could definitely look down and see some ways that she would do things differently, just like I see with my own children. But yeah, that was hard. It was hard, but at the same time, I came to you with so much that when I would go to other like therapists or other places for help, I've had people tell me that, wow, like most people come to me with a few things, like I don't even know where to start with you. And each time I would hear something like that, it just solidified again, it validated again, like, oh, I am too much. I am too much. I am. It's too much. Like my trauma has been too much. You know, my grief, my loss, like it's so different. And getting on that first call with you, I laid it all down.
Yeah, I do remember. I do remember when we really went through some things that happened in your childhood that you were trying to protect me from it, like that you were worried that it would be too much for me. And I will tell you that, you know, I've been doing this enough, and it's not like a dissociation tactic, but because I believe so strongly that there's this force that like knows exactly what it's doing and it's guiding you on your journey. I normally don't like worry about people. I look back on things that happened in their story of like how can we transmute this to wisdom? How can we transmute it to light? You shared a small percentage of your story, and it was one of those times it was hard to shake it after, because it's just sometimes like I guess it would be like some form of privilege. I'm like, no, those things don't really happen. Or, you know, and I worked in an inner city school for a period of time. I know bad things happen, but Katie, like specifically, you have been through some horrific things that no one deserves to be or to go through. And I think it's so beautiful that you even don't want to say anything bad about your mom, because even the people that neglected us or, you know, couldn't show up for us, we still love them. And so I'm never a fan of villainizing anyone's mom. So like your mom is complex as everybody is, every human is. And she didn't show up in ways, and she did in ways, but the way she didn't show up did impact you. And kind of taking it back to what you were saying about, you know, this relationship being one of the first relationships that you experience, like my job is to model what it's like for you to get a secure adult on board. And a secure adult means that they're emotionally attuned, they don't shame you, they're consistent, you can trust them. And so I guess I can kind of bring it back to a question. Like at some point during our work, you had to learn how to parent that teenager and allow her to go, hey, like, you don't have to protect me and manage my life and keep me safe anymore. You just get to be the fun part of me that, had you had the right support, would have just been a teenager, which is like, man, I'm raising one right now. He's 15. He is living his best dang life, right? Like we don't have a whole ton of responsibility. You're kind of finding out who you are. So you know, you had to learn how to parent her, which means you had to have some internal boundaries for you. So like, you know, tell us a little bit about what it was like, because at least for me, I know that like in my story, my teenager was loud. She caused a lot of drama and shame in my life. And so when I first even learned that concept, I was like, that one's got to go. Like I can't be healthy and have her around. And I didn't like her. And I didn't want to deal with her because she was kind of a lot. And I think she was in a lot of pain. I just didn't realize that at the time. And when I learned how to integrate her and parent her and listen to her, man, she's one of the coolest. Like she loves fashion. She's a good time. She does need some parameters around it. She is so brave. I mean, for me, like I would walk into a bar at 15 years old. Like I own the place. Like PS, that's off and also brave. And like now I'll walk on a podcast episode with you and bring her along, or, you know, do a workshop or create a course or walk into a session I know nothing about what I'm getting myself into. So tell me a little bit about like, how'd you parent her and how did you integrate and harness her into the life you lead now?
Well, first I had to meet her and recognize her. I know you're going to talk about that in future episodes, but that was a major point for me. Because I viewed myself as just, I didn't know parts of self. So when my inner child or inner teenager would come up, not being able to identify that, it all just felt mixed together and hard. It felt like a lot to try to dig through. So once I learned, I would have an experience or something and I would say, okay, who was that experienced that? My inner child, my inner teenager, my maladaptive adult, like who showed up there? Then I was able to put some of the tools in place that we use, the eat the invisible popcorn. That gave my teenager time to pause before she reacted, which then that gave me the time to collect data. I had never attempted to collect data before. I just reacted. I remember the first time you explained kind of boundaries, even with my family. And I was like, Robin, you have never met my family. Like, you have never met my friends. Like, I don't think you understand. We're going to have to renegotiate your entire system that works for everybody else. But once I leaned into it and again, starting to let her express herself without having to burn everything down, she started to express herself in safer ways. She didn't have to get so honestly violent and mean. Because my inner teenager liked to she would think of the meanest things, even if they weren't true, and say those to hurt
But
people.
tell me, like, after you said it, did you ever feel bad about it? Like, did you feel guilty? Like, if you woke up the next morning, like, what was your relationship to yourself like after those type of things came out of your mouth?
Oh, it was horrible. I never want to go back there. And it wasn't just after that. I mean, it was after a night where I reacted like that, or an interaction with friends, family, my kids. Like, my inner teenager was so protective. She just came up so fierce, so fast.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I would just experience so much shame and regret. And I mean, I really did not like myself.
Yeah. So that's the same experience I had. Like, I joke that my inner teenager kind of had two speeds. She would either cut you or cut you off. Like, I mean, I'd go for the jugular sometimes, or I would literally act like you were dead to me and never talk to you again. And I'm no good at being mean. Like, I would wake up the next day after I went for someone's jugular, or the lowest thing that I could do, and I would feel so much shame, so much guilt, because that's not who I am. Like, I don't want to be mean to anyone. I've spent a long time in my life not feeling confident or good about myself. I don't want anybody else to feel that way. So I always think, like, because I know you and I know what a kind, compassionate human being, it's like, we were no good at being mean.
No, man. And gosh, no.
It's so far from who you are. So I promise to everybody listening, like, I'm having Katie on this week. I'm having another amazing guest next week. And then we are going to talk about parts of self, because it's time. Like, we need those boundaries first so that we know who are the right people to bring that inner child to, make sure that you're safe. And then we can go into some of that work. But I have another question for you. What helped you start noticing the difference between a trauma response and a choice that was actually aligned for you? Because what can be confusing in this work, at least it was for me, Katie, you kind of tend to run a little bit more anxiously in the attachment styles, and I tend to run a little bit anxiously too. And it was really hard for me in the beginning to know the difference between my trauma response and my intuition. Because when I was anxious, it would feel like everybody hates me. That's true. Or like and that's not true. But when I feel like the difference for me was, like, the trauma response had a lot of, like, energy. I mean, if someone's listening, you can't see that I have my hands going next to my face, but it had a lot of charge around it, where, like, something that was aligned didn't. It felt a lot more like peaceful, even though it might not have been the easiest decision. So that's kind of how I could tell the difference between a trauma response and something that was aligned for me, was, like, energetically, it felt a little bit different. What was it like for you?
Well, I think whenever I first met with you, I was almost always reacting out of a trauma response. So first I even had to learn what an alignment choice felt like. which I still just think back and I'm like, what, accountant for 20 years? Like, this is so crazy. Now we're here. But then, the trauma response, the energy behind that was so chaotic and intense and did have a lot of anxiety behind it. It felt like everything had to happen right then. Also, there was so much perfectionism behind it. There was just a lot of gross feeling. Like, I never walked away like feeling like confident or good or excited to go into everything because I was living just a constant trauma response. And then once I started using the tools and calming my nervous system and showing up more authentically in small ways in the beginning, I started experiencing those alignment. And I remember on a call seeing myself on the Zoom video and being like, whoa, she looks happy. And also it felt like I felt home, and I didn't even know what home felt like because I had never felt that safe with myself. But the more I was letting go of these trauma responses and putting people in my boundary categories on the pyramid, it was really eliminating so much of that was flying my way. Cat.
There's a cat paw in my,
I'm sorry. The oversharing, the over-explaining, walking away from these situations like, oh my gosh, I just word vomited all over that person. So the more that I was able to experience these aligned experiences, my nervous system, my body slowed down.
And I think that makes it easier to hear your truth, because I think alignment is truth. But it reminds me of a time, like, because you mentioned that you had kind of shifted into perfectionism a little bit around being a mom, just because you wanted to do it so differently than the way you were treated. And I remember you being, pretty burned out, like being all things to all people. And we shifted the like the good mom thing, like, doesn't have a finish line. My gosh, I tried. And it was like, okay, this finish line moves every time I think I did it right. Like, there's something else, or I didn't do it enough. And so I offered to you, like, what if we shifted it from a good mom to a present mom? Mm-hmm. And I think, within that, because I know for myself, one time, like, I heard Wayne Dyer, who's one of my favorite spiritual teachers, was like, if your kid is 8 years old, he can put laundry in a washing machine. And I was like, what? And even now my son's 15 and he doesn't want to do that. But, you started giving some responsibilities to your kids. But like, when you had to be that good mom, you had to do it all, be the accountant, do all the things. And like, I don't think that actually was in alignment with who you were at the time. So it kind of gave you the freedom too, to like pull back a little bit and allow your kids to learn responsibility and still be a good mom.
Right. Yeah, I definitely was showing up. I was parenting from fear, a lot of fear. So I was really showing up for them from a place where I never wanted them to experience anything that I did. And so I was definitely overdoing everything. And there was a session where we had talked about how me doing that could actually be keeping them from the lessons that God and the universe has coming their way. And that was another big shift for me. And it also helped me realize that I already wasn't parenting like my mom was. So I didn't have to continue to just beat myself up every day about everything I did wrong. And it wasn't helping my kids and it wasn't helping me. We made an outline at one point, kind of like a dream mom. Like, what would I want to show up like as my ideal mom. And once we made that kind of outline, I realized that I was already doing a lot of those things. My kids already had a safe place to come and talk to me. They already had a right to express their voice and feelings and emotions. The Byron Katie quote, an inauthentic yes is a no to self. I remember when you sent me that quote and I put it on my fridge because I was walking around just yes, 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 yes. And so reeling that back in also modeled for my kids that you can make a choice. No complete can be a complete sentence. So once we went through that, I could literally take a breath like that. It was like, oh, I'm already showing up in all these new ways, and I'm not giving myself any credit for it.
What a beautiful thing I got to witness, by the way, because I just got to watch it all go down. But I think, you bring up like a great point that fear or codependency, which is like, if you're okay, I'm okay. If everybody else is okay, I'm okay. It's almost like we stand in between the universe and that person getting a lesson. And remember, like a lesson is a teacher. So there are natural consequences in this world, right? Like, for instance, like if someone is mean to you, you don't want to be around them, right? Like that should be a natural consequence. That's the teacher that goes, hey, that's not how you treat people, or you're out of your integrity. But codependency stands in the way and goes, no, don't, like, I'll do it, or I'll make it okay, or I'll ignore it. And then we're prohibiting that person from getting the natural consequence from the universe. And I know that, because I'm a parent, it's very hard to watch our children go through a challenge or struggle, but man, it is a part of life. And when we prohibit them from ever experiencing it, we're actually not preparing them for the world that we live in, which is hard things happen, lessons come our way. And I think that the best and most wonderful gift we can give our kids is our own self-work, right? Because you have modeled to these kids what it's like to show up to yourself, to take care of yourself, to honor yourself. I mean, 20 years as an accountant to shift to a healing profession.
Yes.
And I definitely remember a long time ago, because like Katie knows very well, my intuition kind of guides this work. I'll never be like, Katie, you need to quit your accounting job. But I think like so many ways I was like, I just don't like see you as an accountant. I think there's a lot more you have to offer this world. And we haven't even talked about your intuitive gifts that have shocked me to the core at times. But I love that reframe. And I think that like your kids have benefited so much from you kind of stepping back and being a support, not a rescuer. Right. And how does that feel as a mom to like be able to like know that you showed up, but also let them experience life in a way that can shape them for the better too?
Yeah, it feels good. It feels in alignment. It feels like at the end of the day, and this is how I measure things. At the end of the day, can I go to bed and feel comfortable with the choices that I made? And definitely now I can look back day to day and it's like, oh yeah. And I did go back and apologize for that, or we did have a conversation around that. There was communication around that, and that all has helped. I remember when you first recommended Codependent No More. Yeah, I hated that book. And I remember texting you a few times too, like, what? Like, why would you have me read this? Like, I'm not reading this. And then coming back to it and getting mad at it, and then coming back to it and embracing some of it. And now I tell every single client about that book. But yeah, it's definitely helped a lot. And with my parenting, it's nice to show up from a place that isn't fear, because I do love deeply and I love my kids more than anything. And it just feels really good to be able to show up from them as the mom that I was hoping I would be one day. Which I learned from watching like TV shows, or my best friend Elizabeth growing up she has an amazing mom. And this is where I'm going to get emotional. I didn't know how to be a mom. I had no idea. I didn't know how to cook dinners. I didn't know how to do laundry. I didn't know how to have food in the house. I just didn't know how to do all of those things from a mom perspective. And I would watch TV shows to study literally as a young kid, like, okay, that's what a mom does, or my friends' moms. And so now to put all of that together, I feel like I'm living that life in a lot of ways.
Okay. So Katie, you know, I'm always like honest, that I believe that boundary work is grief work. And you were mentioning like that when we first started talking about boundaries, when you first started this work, it was like, no, wait, not my family or not my friends. So like what type of grief or what emotions came up for you when you started honoring your boundaries, like for real, when we started working together?
For me, once I started really truly practicing boundaries, I wasn't expecting grief. I was actually thinking, oh, I'm going to do boundaries and everything's going to be rainbows and butterflies. But so much grief came up, and the deep grief and sadness I wasn't expecting, but it also showed me how much before I was showing up from a place out of alignment, how much before I would self-abandon. And so letting go of that identity in a lot of ways felt like a death of self. I mean, we went through my friends and family and put them on the boundary pyramid. And once I had to get honest about where people really show up for that, for me, that felt like a really lonely place at first. Very lonely. I remember being on a call and being like, well, shit, Robin, I have 2 friends now. So, I mean, not truly, but true friends that maybe fit in this category or a next. But
well, it can feel alone, especially when you're not a friend to you. Like I really believe that the universe like kind of detaches to reattach in a healthier way, but we need to reattach by being a friend to ourselves and learning how to trust ourselves. That's why I'll say like, yeah, you know, you feel like that right now, but this might be the universe's way of creating space for you to go in that trust category for you and then have that level of discernment to then bring people back in. But I think what you just said is so honest, Katie. Like there is a point in the work where we're like, whoa, cool. Now I don't have friends. Like, why did I even do this? But what you were saying, the way you were coping before, like the self-abandonment and the numbing was actually just disconnecting you from that knowing, because a boundary pyramid or placing people or categorizing doesn't ruin a relationship. It brings you into a place of reality within that relationship. So it just means like the grief was always there. You always wanted to be closer to this person or wanted things to be healthier with this person or felt rejected or, you know, dismissed by that person, but we just weren't attuning to it. So like with anything, like there's that saying, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off or make you cry or, you know, like fill in the blank. And also to kind of just complement what you said, I believe that, you know, we're kind of going up like a spiral of consciousness. And when we go from one to the next, meaning that we have expanded ourselves, not everything can go with us. And like, a great example for you is like accounting couldn't go with you because it was a part of you that you had outgrown. You kind of said died, like parts of us do die. That's why it's grief work. Even when we're not grieving friendships, like a lot of the times it's like, oh, well, this friend isn't coming with me or this job isn't coming with me. We're also letting go of a part of us. And I know for me, when I filled out something similar to the boundary pyramid, it was like shocking. I was like, okay, like I thought I had 100 friends. But then when I really looked at it, it was like, well, I was trying to put the wrong people in the wrong categories. No wonder I had a massive trust wound that was festering all the time in my relationships. But it did for a moment feel kind of deeply isolating. And that's where the concept of solitude versus lonely can come in. That like, if I only did this and left people in the boundary pyramid, like, and now your whole life, everybody's in shared interest, right? If we look and go, okay, like now I have this opportunity to build this close relationship with myself. Because when you are with yourself, when you're with that inner child and that teenager, you're never alone. And these are the things that when I first say them, some clients are like, sure, Robin.
Oh yeah, I was one of them. I definitely was one of them. I mean, I remember even at the retreat, like being like, gosh, when I first met you, I was like, what? Like, none of this is going to work, honestly. But I was such a people pleaser that I'd show up to the next call and be like, okay, I guess I'll try this crazy stuff that you're talking about. And then it started working and it started creating space. You know, those relationships that I was sticking in those categories before that weren't in my best interests in multiple ways, they started going away because I wasn't feeding into them anymore. I wasn't giving them the energy. And what it did was it created space for friends and coworkers, different people to come in that modeled boundaries and things for me. And it felt so comforting. You know, I met, during this work, I made friends with Jenna Swanson at a body talk retreat. And she modeled boundaries so beautifully. And we were able to still have such a deep friendship. And it reminded me of like working with you because it's like, oh, wait, I can respond to this text and say, I don't have the capacity for that right now. Or I could be honest. I could just say, no, I'm not interested in that. And there was no guilt, like, what, you owe me, you need to do this, like all the things I had always experienced. So by removing so much of that, it really created the space for these new relationships to come in. And then that really created the space for my intuition that I had had all along to come back. And man, to think on our first call, I was an accountant trying to, which, you know, no hate to accountants.
No,
it just
not
wasn't
at
in
all.
alignment for me any longer. Yeah. Like accountant was the job that I did because I should do it, you know? Yeah. And so once I started leaning into this healer role, which is really what I wanted to do with my life so desperately, was help people. Everything started falling into place. The boundaries felt easier. The people coming into my life that were respectful of my boundaries and I of them, like it really created this beautiful opening that I'm so thankful for.
Yeah. And you just articulated that so beautifully. I really believe that what the universe takes, it replaces with something that is more in alignment for you. But there is that period of time where we have to kind of rely on trust and faith. That's why trust is such a huge part of this work. I mean, I'm kind of watching you answer these questions and realizing that the core of what's the difference between the old version of you and this version is that you trust yourself now. Yeah. And in trusting yourself, you were able to trust the right people and you were able to trust the universe, because there was a time, I mean, I distinctly remember, Katie, you're such a seeker. You're like one of the greatest seekers I know. And you had signed up for this beautiful retreat. I think it was in San Diego. You were afraid to leave your house because so many bad things had happened to you. And now I'm looking at you and I just got to hear all about how you did a retreat in Nashville on your own and how you met all these. I mean, you are like out there, girl, like not afraid. I mean, I shouldn't say not afraid because I never want to sell that like those feelings don't come up. It's just we manage them differently. Mm-hmm. But like that shift from I'm afraid to leave my home because everyone and everything is a threat to like I can show up from a place of love and trust, manage the fear and go kick some serious ass and help so many people.
Yeah, it is crazy to think about. Someone asked me in Nashville recently, like, how did you come here to do this? And I was like, honestly, I wanted to help people. And so I booked an Airbnb and invited strangers and it worked. So I'm doing it again. Now I use a studio and I have better contacts. But yeah, I definitely really leaned into that. I really leaned into showing up as the healer that I needed.
So, you know, I'm always going to paint a comprehensive picture that like here we're talking about this life you've built that's so vastly different than like the life of trauma and fear that you were living. But like patterns come back up. They come back up for me. They come back up for everybody. So like now when you catch yourself falling back into an old pattern, like what are some ways that you show up for yourself?
Well, I definitely pause. That's been a big thing. The pause. I don't eat, I guess I still eat invisible popcorn, but that's during the pause. And I get curious. And I give myself grace. And I realize that these things that are happening, you know, so much, it's not so much that they're happening to me, like they're what you talked about before. They're lessons, they're opportunities to learn from. and learning that the patterns that I was repeating over and over weren't me, they were behaviors. That doesn't define me as a person.
Wait, say that again. Oh my gosh, say that again.
Yeah. So the patterns that I was just repeating over and over, they were just behaviors. That doesn't mean Katie is a bad person. It was just Katie repeating these patterns that they literally helped keep me safe in childhood and throughout my teenage years. Now I can look at them, and there's times that I'm thankful, because if I didn't have those fierce protectors, I don't know if I would be here today. I honestly don't know that, but now those opportunities arise, and it's like, oh, okay, here's this opportunity. If it's too overwhelming, we get on a call, and you've seen in real time the switch from getting on the call and being like, literally this energy just running at you like a freight train, to being like, okay, here's what happened. I know this doesn't define me. Like, this is their shit. This is my shit. Like, just learning all of that really helped take away so much of that shame and guilt that I carried around from those patterns and behaviors that I was repeating to keep myself safe.
Round of applause. That was amazing. I think it also is good for us to just mention that, like I said, we've known each other for 6 years. It doesn't mean that we've worked together every week for the last 6 years. Usually people come to me for like a consistent amount of time, and then they come back as needed. So I think like what you're saying is sometimes, and this is true for me. I mean, I have a therapist. I have 2 therapists. I have kind of like one that I call my spiritual dad, who will be on the show at some point because he's just one of my favorite people in the whole world. And I have a therapist, but like sometimes we just need a little refresh with someone that can be like, oh yeah, remember you're blacked out in this part of self. You got all these resources on board. Let's steer you back. So I think it's just really important to remember that like, we can't necessarily do this on our own. And it is nice, whether it's a professional or someone in your trust category that you can go back to, that can kind of give you that little nudge to get back up to your highest, healthiest version. Mm-hmm. But you're right, Katie. I mean, the opposite of trauma is choice, right? Trauma just means we don't have the luxury of choice. We just react to stay above water. And your story, oh man, like it's really true. I always say, like, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Like, if you can do this, if you can be where you are in your life with this type of regulated nervous system, with the relationships that you've built, living a fully expressed life, like anybody can.
Very much. Truly. Truly.
Yeah. And that's the power of, like, I know that sometimes this work is hard and tedious and costs money sometimes, because I know, like, I'm not cheap and I've invested a lot of money. Hands down, the best investment I've ever made in my life is the right type of emotional support.
Right. It makes all the difference.
Yeah,
it makes all the difference. And it has been invaluable.
I agree. So, like, not because I do this for a living, but I encourage people to take that risk. I know that, like, when I first kind of started and went on something that was very expensive, like, I had to put some of it on a credit card. Like, again, not to promote anybody goes into debt or does anything out of alignment, but, like, to me, if you don't have emotional health, you don't have much in this life. If you don't know how to regulate your emotions, I mean, for me, and this is probably true for you, Katie, like, my life looked fine from the outside. I did a great job of, like, making everything externally look like I was fine. Internally, I was not fine. I was really struggling with my self-worth.
Yeah, same. My self-worth was tied to so much that it no longer, my self-worth is inside. I have my own self-worth. I'm not looking externally for it. So that's been a And I shared that with someone recently in my life who was considering starting some of this work, and they were scared also of what the other side looked like. And I'm like, you just can't imagine the other side of that hill.
Oh, I mean, it's why I'm doing this podcast. It's why I see as many clients as I do. I think it's why because it's brave to do this work too. Like, it's brave to be the person that needs to have the answers for people. And so, I mean, I think it's so deeply ingrained in us. Like, we know the benefit that we're like, you're flying off to or driving off to Nashville and doing scary, hard things just just to share that light with other people.
Yes, that's just been so amazing for me, is now all this pain that used to walk in the room first and be too much, and tied up my identity of, I just felt gross. I felt like that neglect was the face I showed the world. Now to be in a place where my clients can walk in with anything and realize that all that pain I went through has put me in a position to hold space for them and truly understand what they're going through, but then be there for them in a way that was modeled for me and helped me feel safe, and then see my own transformation has just been, it's greater than I ever could have imagined. And I can't believe I get to do this for my job now. It doesn't even feel like a job. And the clients, when I'm helping my clients heal, it's helping me heal. And I remember you telling me that long ago. And again, I was like, oh, okay, maybe we'll see if Robin knows. But yeah, it's been amazing. It's just been so great. And
now you get it.
Yes.
Now you get it. When you would say, thank you so much. And I go, well, thank you. Mm-hmm. Like, look what I got to witness. Look what I got to get paid for and be a part of. It's literally a dream. So Katie, like what would you say to the past version of you that almost didn't stick with me, that almost was going to drop out of that group, that maybe thought this wasn't for her or her trauma was too much? Like, what would you say to her now from the vantage point in that mountain climb that you're in now?
I would just really remind her that she doesn't have to hold it all. She doesn't have to have all the answers, and that her worth is not fixing and saving other people. It's in being her authentic self. Definitely. And I think I would just tell her, I love her. Thank you. Thank you for continuing to show up when it was really hard.
And that part that was people pleasing and over functioning was such a people person. Like it's just a maladaptive way to express your love, because we know that it's maladaptive because you have to leave you, right? Like there's this other alternative where you can love people and love you. You can be in connection with them and in connection with you. And like, watch out, world. Katie Parisi is coming, because you are just getting started and I haven't even talked about your work yet. So real quick, Katie, I have a part of the episodes when I have guests on where I just ask you guys the same question so that it brings a little bit of like individualized perspective to the question. So first question is, what is a belief about yourself that you had to unlearn?
My self-worth used to be tied to how needed I was, like how much I just said yes to everything, and that's no longer there. Just believing that my self-worth was tied to how needed I was. That was a big shift. Okay. Believing that I'm not too much. I'm okay as I am, and the right people will show up and love me.
I'm clapping. What is one small daily practice that helps you feel connected to yourself?
The Bird app, the self-care crazy Bird app that I started 6 months ago that I'm obsessed with, and I check in every day, and that's definitely helped. But I journal every single day. I journal.
Okay. So tell them about the self-care Bird app, because you told me about it and I downloaded it. So I didn't know.
It's called Finch, and it's basically where you can put your daily to-do list or whatever you would like, and you can add in self-care, which I do every day or every week. And then you get to go in and like check off that you did that, and you get coins and you get positive affirmations and all these great things. And then you get to use that to decorate your little bird house. And I just love it. I love it. I check in with it every day.
So cute. And I told you that I was with my best friend not that long ago, and I had my phone sitting out, and like it popped up almost like a text at the top, and he goes, "Who is that?" And I go, "Oh, it's my self-care bird." And he was like, what? Yeah. So it is a fun way to kind of chart and just make self-care and some of the tedious parts about like to-do lists kind of fun. So thanks for connecting me with that, because you told me about it. I didn't know. And I've shared that with some clients. So what is a piece of advice that changed everything for you? If you can think about one. I know there's a lot.
You don't have to fix or save other people.
That's
Yeah. Setting that
that's
down
really
was like setting down a freight train.
support, don't fix or save. Support, don't fix or save, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is a book that deeply impacted your growth?
Oh, geez. Codependent no more.
Yeah. I would honestly say, like, I'm going to extend that to anything Melody Beattie ever
Yes.
wrote. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
she was and is just one of my greatest teachers, and yours too. And you want to barf during that book. Like Minka brought it up in her episode. I mean, you definitely want to barf, but it holds
Oh,
such a
I think
beautiful
I
meaning.
threw it away. I threw it away and had to reorder it. And I was like, what?
I think you read it like a bunch of times too. Like throughout our
I
work,
did.
you've been like, I'm reading it again.
I have.
Yeah.
And now there's an updated version. So
You told me about it.
and I
Actually,
use the Language of Letting Go app every day.
Language of Letting Go app is my hands down it's my number one piece of self-care.
Mm-hmm.
I've been reading it for probably 10 years and I don't even think I've ever felt like I reread the same passage ever.
Yeah.
So
Thank you
can't
for sharing
recommend that
that.
highly enough.
Mm-hmm.
So what is something you do now that your younger self would be proud of?
Definitely the type of mom that I am. That, and this makes me emotional, but I'm a safe place for people, and that feels amazing. I always craved that, and now I am that for people. But number one would be the type of mom I am.
Yeah.
My younger self, I would tell my younger self, like, you did it.
And I'm just thinking about what a great mom you are to your inner child.
Yeah.
Right. Like that you are the mom now that your mom couldn't be, and that we don't need to villainize her. She just didn't get that opportunity in her life. She
Mm-hmm.
birthed you,
Mm-hmm.
and you were anointed to disrupt some of that generational trauma that was going through her line, right?
Very much. I'm a generational cycle breaker, and man, I'm sending love to all of you out there because it's needed. It's important
I think
work.
probably everybody listening to this podcast has, whether you like it or not, because I personally, I don't know that I signed up for this, but it just happened.
Right.
Like have been anointed to wake up. And Katie, you're such a beautiful example that like there's a reason for it. I have literally never seen a client do what you've done in your life and not transform it to something that can help other people, the planet. Like, so thank you. Like, I know I've witnessed your journey and I know it wasn't always easy, but you are a great mom and you're a great mom to that little girl that deserved to have an emotionally attuned mom.
Thank you.
Tell us a
I'm
little
gonna let that
bit.
in.
What's that?
I said, thank you. I'm going to let that in.
Yeah, there you go. Let that in. You should. So Katie, tell us a little bit about like what you got going on professionally, where we can find you, if there's anything coming up that you'd like people to know. And then real quick, before you say that, I would love to extend an invite that you come back for an episode on parts of self.
I would love that. I would love that.
Awesome.
I love
You can think about it. You
it's
don't have to say
actually, it gets, I don't want to say addicting, but it gets kind of fun to like kind of screw up and be like, oh, who showed up there? You know, and you get to learn a lot. But, so right now I recently just moved into a office location that I'm in right now in downtown Wentzville, Missouri. So any local Missouri people can find me there. Otherwise, I also do virtual sessions. I do body talk, breath work, sound healing. Body talk is a modality. I know earlier we had kind of touched base on it, but the way that it was developed by Dr. John Beltheim, who's a physicist and all kinds of different letters behind his name. But it's basically like if you cut your finger, you put a Band-Aid on your body and you trust it to heal that, where our body can do that in so many ways, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And so body talk is just a way to go in and ask the body what's priority for it to heal at this time. And through my work with you and coming out of that should be, should do phase of life into my authentic self, I've realized this medical, intuitive, huge side of me that is on board. And I appreciate her now. And I allow her to show up. And so she does through breath work, body talk, and just my coaching, which I've trained with you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would just say I'm accepting clients in person, virtually. And I believe I'll be back in Nashville, in October, but I'm not 100% sure. But you can go to my website, immersive-healing.com, to check that out. My Instagram is Immersive Healing, and my Facebook as well. But I'm always available, even if people have questions or, man, I've been there. I've been at the beginning, and I almost didn't make that call. And I'm so thankful that I did. And I really truly do believe now that what I went through allows me to hold space for just about anything someone can show up with.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And we'll put all your contact information underneath in the episode so they can find you. So Katie, thank you so much for being here. And I know we got like a real late start because I couldn't hear anything for a period of time, but we got that worked out. Yeah. Thank you for your honesty, for your story, and for your heart. You are living proof that it's not about becoming someone else. It's about returning to the version of you that was always there underneath all of those maladaptive protection mechanisms. And to anyone listening, if Katie's story resonated, please share this episode. Maybe you know someone who's carrying a lot, someone who's skeptical, and someone who needs a reminder that it's safe to begin. And as always, I'll leave you with this. Boundaries aren't about keeping others out. They're about staying in relationship with yourself and being able to stay in relationship with you and the other people that you're in relationship with. So let it be slow, let it be sacred, let it be yours. I'll see you next time. I have an amazing guest next week to share her experience of going through some boundary work. And then Katie, thanks for queuing us up. We're going to talk about parts of self work, and I'm going to do a whole series on that. And I would love to have you come back in because I just intuitively, and because I've witnessed your inner child, I want to give her a little space to come in and share a little bit about her experience or your experience going through and meeting her and that teenager. So hopefully, if you're up for it, we'll see you again soon.
Yes. And thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I know that I've done this work, but you have guided me and you have changed my life. Same as Ben, who is now my friend also. I love Ben. So thank you. Just thank you so much for you showing up and sharing your gift with all of us, because you're a phenomenal person, and I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful to have you in my circle.
My goodness. Okay. I'm definitely letting that in and crying at the end and the beginning of this episode. Thank you, Katie. I mean, it's been an absolute honor and gift. And there's nothing more, there's not an amount you could have paid me. There's nothing more rewarding than watching you expand in the way that you are, because you were always meant to help people. And I know I've witnessed your intuition firsthand when you called me or you texted me one day. You were like, I'm so sorry. I don't want to do this. But like my son, Gabriel's body is calling out to me and he doesn't feel well and he's nauseous. And literally 2 minutes later, he texted me from school and said, I'm not feeling well. And I was like, normally I'd be like, I don't know. Is he really? I was like, tires were burning while I was pulling out. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I have firsthand experienced your gifts of intuition, your heart, your experience. And I know Katie knows I'm very stingy on referrals. And I think I mentioned this with Ben, like I would send my mother to Ben. I would send my mother to you. In fact, I did send my mother to you one time. So Katie is an amazing healing practitioner, amazing person, and someone who embodies and has lived every bit of her work. So I can't recommend you highly enough. So if any of her offerings resonate with you, call her, make a connection, and Katie, we'll see you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this work. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come connect with me over on TikTok at Robin Breckenridge or Instagram at Coach with Robin, where I share even more insights, tools, and conversations around boundaries, self-trust, relational healing, and so much more. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and personal growth purposes only. The insights and tools I share are based on my experience as a life and relationship coach and are meant for general guidance. Each person's story is unique, and the nuances of individual experiences can't always be addressed in this format. What's shared here may not be applicable to every situation, especially those involving abuse, oppression, severe mental illness, or systematic harm. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek support from a qualified mental health professional or emergency resources. Thank you for listening and for showing up for yourself in this way. Take care, and I'll see you next time.